All right, this is Mrs. Straub. This is the second section of the Industrial Revolution, and we are focusing on life during the Industrial Revolution. So I'm going to present my slides here. In the Edpuzzle, what I'm going to have you do is answer this question to get it kicked off. What were the 4 causes of the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain? We're going to be talking about a new society in this section of the Industrial Revolution lesson. The pace of industrialization accelerated rapidly in Britain. By the 1800s, people could earn higher wages in factories than on farms. With this money, more people could afford to heat their homes with coal from Wales and dine on Scottish beef. They wore better clothing that was woven on power looms in England in industrialized cities. Cities grew with waves of job seekers. This video is not going to play inside the Edpuzzle, but it is linked in your Google Classroom under Life During the Industrial Revolution, and I'm asking you to watch it. All right, a new society, the rise of cities, urbanization. This is when cities double in population, or it's the move of people from rural areas, the country, to the city. People lived in tenements. These are multi-story buildings cramped with tiny apartments. No water, no sanitation or sewage. There was no running water. This also caused cholera to spread, a horrible, horrible disease, sickness that makes you horribly sick. You die from it, horrible vomiting, and well, diarrhea. It's not very pleasant. Factory working conditions. For centuries, most Europeans had lived in rural areas. After 1800, the balance shifted towards cities. This shift was caused by the growth of the factory system, where the manufacturing of goods was concentrated in a central location. Between 1800 and 1850, the number of European cities boasting more than 100,000 inhabitants rose from 22 to 47. So let me break that down a little bit. Between 1800 and 1850, those 50 years, the number of cities went from 22 to 47 with 100,000 people in it. Most of Europe's urban areas at least doubled in population, some even quadrupled. That's times 4. This period was one of urbanization, city building, and the movement of people to cities. London was the country's most important city. It had a population of about 1 million people by 1800. During the 1800s, its population exploded, providing a huge labor pool and market for new industry. London became Europe's largest city, with twice as many people as its closest rival, Paris. Most of Europe's urban areas at least doubled in population, some even quadrupled. So here you've got working conditions in factories. Work was very hard, boring, and long. Average hour, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Sundays were their only days off. Caused a lot of health problems, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and black lung disease. Entire families would work in factories. The women were paid less than men. Children were paid even less and were often beaten. Children were taken from orphanages if families didn't want to send their children to work. Industrialization changes life. The new middle class grows. The working class becomes a thing. life worsens. It gets worse, not better. Machines are starting to replace humans. Positive effects of industrialization: created jobs, nations became wealthy, raised standard of living, provided more housing and clothing. Tenements. There was a great divide in the urban population. The rich and the middle class lived in pleasant neighborhoods. Huge numbers of poor, however, struggled to survive in foul-smelling slums. Because many cities grew rapidly, they had no development plans, sanitary codes, or building codes. Also, they lacked adequate housing, education, and police protection for the people who poured in from the countryside, seeking jobs. Most of the unpaved streets had no drains, and garbage collected in heaps. Workers lived in dark, dirty shelters, with whole families crowding into one bedroom. They packed into tiny rooms in tenements, multi-story buildings divided into crowded apartments. No running water, only community pumps. There was no sewage or sanitation system, and waste and garbage rotted in the street. In time, reformers pushed for laws to improve conditions in city slums. In 1842, a British government study showed an average lifespan to be 17 years for working class people in one large city, compared with 38 years in a nearby rural country area. To increase production, factory owners wanted to keep their machines running as many hours as possible. As a result, the average worker spent 14 hours a day at the job, 6 days a week. Work did not change with the seasons, as it did on the farm. Instead, work remained the same week after week, year after year. Industry also posed new dangers for workers. Factories were seldom well lit or clean. Exhausted workers suffered accidents from machines that had no safety devices. They might lose a finger, a limb, or even their lives. A boiler might explode, or a drive belt might catch an arm. And there was no government program to provide aid in case of injury. Workers were exposed to other dangers as well. Textile workers constantly breathed air filled with lint. If workers were sick or injured, they lost their jobs. This is a picture of a boy named Thomas Savage, and he's in Wadsworth Prison. Children who worked long hours in the textile mills became very tired and found it difficult to maintain the speed required by the overlookers. Children were usually hit with a strap to make them work faster. In some factories, children were dipped head first into the water cistern if they became drowsy. Children were also punished for arriving late for work and for talking to the other children. Parish apprentices who ran away from the factory was in danger of being sent to prison. Children who were considered potential runaways were placed in irons and forced to work. Children often worked from 5 in the morning till 9 at night, lived 2 miles from the mill, Factory owners were responsible for providing their pauper apprentices, pauper being poor, with food. Children constantly complained about the quality of the food. In most textile mills, the children had to eat their meals while still working. This meant that the food tended to get covered with the dust from the cloth. The most dangerous conditions of all were found in coal mines. Frequent accidents, damp conditions, and the constant breathing of coal dust made the average miner's lifespan 10 years shorter than that of other workers. Many workers died of black lung disease from the 10 to 12 hours a day of breathing coal dust. Many women and children were employed in the mining industry because they were the cheapest source of labor. In the textile factories, diseases such as pneumonia and tuberculosis spread, killing many workers. This is what child labor looks like today. To save on labor costs, many corporations have moved their operations to developing countries, where young children work long hours under wretched conditions. In 2007, their number was estimated at 218 million children, ages 5 to 17. They are unprotected by labor laws. For mere pennies per hour, children weave carpets, sort vegetables, or assemble expensive athletic shoes. Several organizations are working to end child labor, including the Child Welfare League of America and the International Labor Rights Fund. If kids work 12 to 15 hours a day, how do you think the rest of their lives will be? How can they improve themselves? Education is the foremost method of economic improvement. Do these kids have the opportunity to attend school if they are working in factories? How will the country as a whole improve if a majority of its population works in factories rather than educating themselves to make a better life? Answer this question in the Edpuzzle. What were the conditions like in factory work?